Good afternoon. Welcome back. Today is tea time. We're going to do it a little bit differently. I keep wanting to have tea out on the veranda and to explore some other things with you, but the wind is too strong and it's too cold right now. So we're inside again, but yesterday I took a walk and had the most amazing experience. For the past 6 months, I've been praying and asking God to show me further things regarding my calling. Many of you don't know where I'm broadcasting from or what I do, and I would like to tell you about that today. And I am dedicating this weekend and next weekend to an observance. Could be, if you call it a secular observance, but really a faithful observance of the end of Lent and Holy Week. So today, Friday, Saturday and Sunday this week, and next Friday, Saturday and Sunday, I will be doing further reflections on the painting behind me and other matters, including aspects of liturgy if they come out on Sundays. So today, I want to begin by declaring that we must all be in a state of discovering a second awakening, a secular second awakening by deprivation of relationships and touch and human encounter other than the people we're locked in our houses with. In a good way, it has suspended our ability to immediately go out and buy something and to distract ourselves from centering on what's important. Like Lent is a time, but most people define Lent as a time of deprivation, and I personally get very impatient with the idea, well, I gave up desserts for Lent, or I gave up, all of that seems superficial, including fish on Friday. I'm not poking at anybody's tradition, but I'm just saying that by saying I gave up, you're focusing on what you do rather than what you're supposed to be doing. And Lent is a time for reflection, withdrawal, reading, reflecting on God's love for us and our love for each other, and just saying what we, totally focused on what we're giving up because we keep craving it. It's no good. It isn't real deprivation, which leads to reflection. And so this weekend and next weekend, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, I'll be talking about reflection rather than deprivation. Today I was driving back. It's amazing how this deprivation has changed. When I was walking in a park last week, just at the beginning, I went on the road, and when I got on the road, there was a guy who came toward me, gave me a V sign for being out and walking because there were so very few people. Right after that, behind me was a woman who was honking her head off and yelled at me, "You shouldn't be walking, you shouldn't be outside." She was off to go get something. Well, the woman behind me is the way our society's been for quite a long time. And I think all of this has forced us to approach a second awakening, but it won't last long as soon as everything is lifted because it's coming from outside rather than from inside. Today I'd like to tell you a little bit why I'm doing this and why I'm here. I'm doing this while all of us are isolated to just share with you the beauties of art and spirituality. I was thinking yesterday, I was walking, I was thinking how this calling came to me many, many years ago. I actually majored in psychology in my undergraduate at Westmont College, California, and then did my master's at Wheaton College, Wheaton Graduate School in Biblical Studies, New Testament, not theology, just literature. And I've always used it. When my wife and I married in 77, we began the Washington Arts Group a year later, and in 76 I began the gallery, and for 40 years I did that. And then Twyla got sick, and a lot of things forced me to close the gallery, not just the economy, but my care for my wonderful wife. And since I've been here, I started coming out here when Twyla was sick and was put in assisted living. I just happened to drive by the church one weekend when I was feeling down. My daughter Abigail took me, invited me to go to our favorite hangout place after apple picking, the Apple House, to have an amazing breakfast and the most amazing applesauce donuts you'll ever eat in your whole life. They're coming right out of the hot grease, and they're not good unless you're right there when the grease is soaking the bag and you have a big quart of milk. We used to, our covenant group at National Presbyterian, some of us would go picking on other friends, and then we'd go and finish by saying that the only excuse we went to go apple picking was to get the donuts and the milk and the coffee. Anyway, that's how I kind of ended up here, and I just thought, I went in and I realized that at every important moment in my wife and my life, we were inside the church across the street, Trinity Episcopal Church in Upperville, Virginia, and that's where God spoke to me. It was where we began the calling of the Washington Arts Group, which I will discuss later in the next 2 weeks, and something that we're going to do virtually, which we've been forced to do, and I'm really excited. It's part of my calling here as artist in residence. I began in fact, I realized that, and I was telling it to my friend at the Episcopal church we were going to at the time, and he says, well, why don't you go out and see what the congregation is like? And I came out the first time for the annual meeting, and as you know, annual meetings can be a mixed bag, but it was wonderful, and people were treating each other quite well, and I found it really healing. So for 5 years, I commuted from Washington, D.C. Out here to pray and worship together. I came out, I may have already shared this, but I came out to the 8:30 service and then commuted back to my other church in Fairfax. So I've been, and it was here in this church that I decided to come into the Episcopal Church in the Anglican tradition. I'm so thankful for this community and this congregation. It's been such a hard time. For the 5 years my wife was in assisted living, and after her death, the congregation here has been just more than amazing to me. How I ended up here, there was a Christmas auction, and I told Rob Vance, I'm looking for a place to live. And he said, do you know of anything? And he said, no, I don't know anything, but I'll keep it in mind and I'll pray. Well, as we were leaving the Cox Hall, the social hall, I looked across the street, and this house was dark. I live across the street from the church, and it had been the rectory, and it had been empty for 4 years. And it was all dark, and I'd seen it before and had kind of forgotten about it. They talked about renting it, but they couldn't decide. They talked about selling it, but they couldn't work it out. And so finally, I came out, and this house was just sitting there in the dark like a specter. And I said to Rob and his wife, what about that house? And his wife said, well, that's obvious. And it turned out that the vestry just the week before decided to rent the house. And so it's provided me a platform to become artist in residence here, which Rob named me a year or so after I came here, lived here. And I've been praying and asking God to show me what to do next with my artist in residency here as far as programming. We did 2 things. One year we did this. We did a art and faith weekend, creative arts weekend, and I premiered the film that I was in that I've told you about, The Life of Lilias Trotter, called Many Beautiful Things, and I got to play John Ruskin, my alter ego. It was very much fun. The second was a year or so, I all the years get mixed up, but the next conference we had was, we featured the new book on the Gardens of Bunny Mellon by Linda Holden, and we had her come and speak, and we had a autographing signing weekend along with works of art by Ed Nippers and by Sandra Bowden. They were all biblical narrative paintings. During Holy Week we won't this year, but I've instituted having visual art with Holy Week events, especially on Maundy Thursday, when we have prayer through the night in the sanctuary. And I have biblical narrative paintings which emphasize that. I think I will go to at least one of them during these 2 weekends to show it to you and really explain it in further detail. While I was walking yesterday, and this is where, again, our forced isolation promotes reflection. And I wasn't looking for anything to reflect on, but I happened to be walking up down the street here, Greystone, and I found this rock. And I thought, this rock is really interesting. This rock, if you look on the other side, has one main vein that joins together, and then there are 3 veins that branch off here. There are 3 here, and then 2 up here, and then there's a togetherness down here somewhere in the past. And I just began to think, this is a symbol of many of the relationships I've developed that have been through our faith community over the years, especially families with young children. It's happened here, it happened at National Press, it happened at Truro where I went. And I just think this is a symbol of us being knit together even though we're apart, and want to explore that more with you through art. The interesting thing about this rock, I saw it in the light, and in the morning light it looked like this more than it did at night, and I couldn't quite tell it the exact same way as I saw it in the morning walking up in the sunlight. Coming back, I finally thought I could find it, but was having a hard time, so I decided to drive my car up and see if I could find it again. After a lot of searching, they all looked the same. All of a sudden I saw it and realized this is the same one. When I picked it up and put it in my element, guess what? Those lines of unity turned into symbols of the Trinity. And that has been the spiritual journey I've been on ever since February 2nd this year, which began 2 years before that, going to Assisi and with a friend and having a vision of family, faith, and community. The other thing that I found yesterday, I've already said this twice, but I'm doing it one more time because this is going to be the basis of the next 2 weekends' reflections. I saw these in a field and was just so burdened yesterday, especially after talking to Rachel in New York, my daughter Rachel in New York, and all the everything is death is surrounding us. And as I said last night, this reminds me of the fragility of life, the fragility of our relationships, that we are to treasure them, and being isolated from them helps us to really treasure them and not take them for granted. Plus, we can't fill our idle hours with going out and buying something to delay reflections like this. So there are reflections on death and dying that are happening right now. We're all forced to do it because of the plague. But as this bowl is a gift to me from a friend, has a white lily and looks like it's coming up out of the earth, and actually Lilias Trotter in her journals, which I showed yesterday, she actually did a painting drawing of the desert lily as a symbol of the desert blooming. So today I want to start our discussion, our tea time, while I'm drinking Core Power. Core Power to you too. Got to do something while we're isolated inside. So this is a painting by a man named William Swett-Charnock. It has special significance to me. William Swett-Charnock was a friend I got to know through different friends, and was a wonderful realist artist. He used the Meriget method, which I'll discuss sometime when we discuss painting. Jacques Meriget was chief curator of the Louvre in the 20s, conservator in the Louvre in the 20s, and he developed what was called the Meriget medium, which a lot of artists use today. Realist artists use it, and it's making your own compound with oil, and he was trying to discover what the oil masters used to paint with. And he did. And I was reminded of that when I was with Abigail and my wife, Twyla, in France. We went to the town where all the ochre, where there's the cliffs of ochre, and it was stated that all the ochre in the world that was used for painting and coloring the powder compound came from there until after World War II. Then it was commercially, artificially created. Above this, the painting above here was painted in 1981 at about the same time that Twyla's portrait was done by William Swetcharnik. You've seen the portrait in the background of all of my tea times in the dining room and some of the others. And I'll go into more detail on that, because on the art of portraiture, because portraiture and still life both tell some same things. This painting was done about the same time, and we showed it at the gallery. It was featured in the Washingtonian magazine and won lots of awards. And I commissioned it for Twyla for our 5th anniversary, and while it was being painted, we discovered we were pregnant with Rachel. So it's a milestone year. This is called Shell and Stone, and it's based on the works of Wordsworth. Wordsworth is a really interesting character, and I kind of decided that's what I wanted to do and didn't really know what I was doing until I came back from my walk. And I started looking up some things about Wordsworth and trying to figure out what this painting means. If you can see in the painting, there's a nautilus shell, there's a sea, it's not sand dollar. It's a urchin, or a shell, a seashell. There's another one in the back, and behind here is an abalone shell. And then here is you can hardly see it. I'll try to do close-ups tomorrow. This is a stone column, and then the back looks like gray plaster or clay. And there's a moth, and there's a salamander climbing up on the glass. And these symbols are part of what Wordsworth was looking for through symbolic symbols, as far as the 4 elements of earth, wind, water, and fire. He believed those were the building blocks of the universe, and he was not just a romantic. He wanted to figure out how to incorporate reason as well as beauty, and how to incorporate science, the finding of a science, in developing and understanding truth. Wordsworth, he quotes from a lot of different things, but shell and stone, the shell represents poetry and beauty. The stone represents geometry. There's a wonderful, in one of his books, which I'll go into more tomorrow, there's a wonderful quote. And it started with his seeing Mont Blanc in Switzerland, which I have yet to see. I'm dying to see it. I've seen it from a distance in a chateau in France. It belonged to a friend of mine, but I haven't been up on it, which I want to do. And in fact, this lady saw Mont Blanc, and it was part of her coming to her calling as a missionary to Algiers. After seeing Mont Blanc, he said, with such a book before our eyes, the vision of a visual representation or sight of Mont Blanc, we would not but choose to read, I have to read my own writing here, we would not choose to read lessons of genuine brotherhood. Then he contrasts that to the plane, which would be not, this is stone also here, but the plane would be earth, like a plain, like a desert plain. The desert plain, or the flat earth, represented reason of mankind. So there was a coming together of relationship, beauty, and reason, and aesthetics. So now that we're in a apocalypse of denial due to the weather, or not to the weather, to the transfer of disease, I'm going to do one distracting reflection and then conclude. I was driving today, and it's interesting to me, I hadn't really thought about it, but now that we're isolated, it's interesting what people are willing to put on their bumpers and on their rear windows. So I was in this little car, and I saw this guy being very animated with this older woman, and on the back it had a firefighter's emblem, like a support of local firefighters. On the other side, on one side, there was a sticker that said, sorry about the language, "I'm only bitchy on Y days all week." Well, what's funny about this is he was in the car just being really animated and irritated. I think he was with his older mother and she couldn't hear, but he was just so agitated, and I thought, this is really telling. How would you be willing to reveal something that strong? It's really hilarious. Anyway, that's the society we live in. There's no reflection, there's just in your face. So our faces have been withdrawn from being in other people's faces, as well as being on the highway and in society. And though this has developed some patience, it's also developed a lot of despair. And so I hope that these reflections as artists in residence here in the next few days will expand your knowledge and desire and thirst for beauty and reason. And I will explain all of this more tomorrow. We'll look more at this painting and go from there. So thank you all for being here with me, and I would like to invite all of you to come visit Trinity Episcopal Church in Upperville. You can visit the grounds. It's locked according to the disease, but you can visit the grounds, and you can actually, if you'd really like to make a day of it, take a picnic. You can get a picnic. There's a place called Hunter's Head. This isn't an advertisement. They don't get anything for this. Neither does the church. There's a place called Hunter's Head, which is probably the best English pub in America. And they have carryout. If you call in, they will bring it out to you in a sack, and it's hot, and you can eat it in the gardens behind the church or anywhere you wish. You can go also from here up to Sky Meadows State Park and eat it there, and it's just glorious. A little bit like a mini Mont Blanc, not nearly as powerful, but very fun and friendly. So thank you for joining me. I will see you tomorrow at the same time at 3, and then tonight we will continue to read The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and we'll be starting a new book very soon. This is a predictor of the future that I'd like to explore with Trinity Church and with you, both here and online. And eventually I want to have a symposium online with the revival of the Washington Arts Group online, which we've never had. We've only done it in person. We're going to have a revival of that kind of symposia, and I want to organize. One of my interns who worked with me at the gallery went to Harvard and teaches at Baylor University on literature, and he's a specialist on Wordsworth, and I'm going to ask him to structure some kind of discussion on some of these issues as we explore them. Anyway, I'll keep you posted and love to see you tomorrow, and look forward to being with you, even if it's not in person. I feel close to you in a cerebellum way or internet way. Thanks. Blessings. See you tonight at 7. Bye.